Hello and welcome to the Podquest of Bread. Tonight, we're going to do an episode that I actually wrote and planned to do earlier this week, but I pushed it off due to the presidential debates and the reaction to them. If you haven't seen my video episode pre-debate or post-debate, I recommend checking those out. There will be a few more post-debate videos coming out, but I really wanted to get this one out. And it's a video based upon both a book and based upon a response to a photograph and a song from a band that means the world to me. Of course, the title of tonight's podcast is Pale Blue Dot. The photo that inspired this was the Voyager 1 photo, the furthest photo of the world taken from our solar system. And the song, of course, is Pale Blue Dot by Dream Theater. And the words that I want to read before I get into this and discuss why this photo, this song, and these words mean so much to me and what I think they mean for us as a society, and I mean as a world society. Before I get into them, I just want to read the words that Carl Sagan wrote because they're all inspiring, beautiful, and somewhat humbling. Look at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, and everyone you ever heard of. Every human being who ever was, lived out their lives, the aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar and every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species, lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit, yes. Settle, not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. Those words were written by Carl Sagan. The words within that brief response to an awe-inspiring photo put into stark reality our existence as a species on this Earth. And of course, I want to speak about it because we, as a species, are a harm and a detriment to not only our existence, but the existence of every other species that is, and every other species that may come on this Earth. Within the topics outlined within this response to a singular photograph taken 3.72 million miles away from our home in the galaxy, within the response to this comes up the topics of war, famine, poverty. It brings up the topics of climate change. It brings up the topics of the destruction of the very planet that sustains our existence. These are all topics that are very much important to us as leftists, but also should be important to those who are just humanity-driven people, those with compassion in their hearts, and those who seek to ensure that the world exists for not only their children, but their children's children and their children's children's children, and so on. We as a society, we spend so much time arguing about who's left and who's right. Whether you're Republican or you're Democrat, a Green or a Libertarian, whether you live in the United States or Britain, Sri Lanka or Bangladesh. We spend so much time dividing ourselves amongst arbitrary countries' borders, arbitrary lines in the sands to distinguish us from our fellow human. We allow language barriers to distinguish us from our fellow human. We allow political and economic ideas, religious moralities to separate us from the fact that we are all of the same species and we are all human. We allow our hatred of someone else based upon race, sexual identity, gender, based upon their religion, based upon their political beliefs, and based upon any other arbitrary idea, hair color, eye color, the look on their face, or how messed up their teeth are. We allow it to divide us as a species, and we allow it to cause us to inflict harm upon each other and harm upon the earth. I wrote in response to this. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no other better demonstration of the folly of human existence, of human conceits, than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot and the only home we've ever come to know. That was Carl Sagan's final part of that. I apologize. What I wrote in response to this is something that we need to think about as a country, and think about as a country that is emerging on the world stage as a dangerous power because of the destruction we have allowed to occur within just our own country. But it's also something we need to think about as humanity as we move forward on the world stage and begin talking about the real issues. All too often, we find ourselves as people fighting over race, gender, sexuality, political affiliation, or religious affiliation. We find ourselves fighting over our nationalist identity, our patriotism, our devotion to political parties. We find ourselves arguing about trivial things in the grand scheme of human existence. We often forget to realize that human existence is quite trivial in relation to the ongoings of the Earth, the galaxy, and the universe as a whole. Our existence started with something much more trivial than that which we spend our days and weeks arguing about. Instead, we as a species on a pale blue dot in a vast galaxy choose to argue over these very trivial things instead of how we sustain our existence on this very pale blue dot we exist on. This dot is the only we know of and have the technology to sustain and ensure exists for the future. While we as a species continue to focus on trivial fights, trivial wars, trivial bickering between countries residing on this pale blue dot, the very pale blue dot continues to die due to our continued ignorance of what these conflicts are doing. For every bomb dropped, gun fired, the plane flew into war, ships set to sea for the purposes of exacting nationalistic domination, we kill another piece of this pale blue dot. For every member of our species killed in war, countless more will die because of our continued destruction of this beautiful pale blue dot. On Earth, we regard ourselves as the dominant species, but in the grand scheme of the universe, we are nothing. We are small. We are a small, insignificant blimp on the timeline that is the universe. As the continued expansion of the universe continues, it is impossible to think that the very genetic material that led to our existence here won't appear elsewhere in this endless universe of worlds. Our demise due to our negligence will lead to the birth of a new species on Earth or elsewhere. This war to keep this pale blue dot habitable for not only our species, but every other species on it is the only war we should seek to engage in. a war that transcends religion, sexuality, gender, national and political affiliation, a war for the very existence of life on this beautiful pale blue dot. You are here. I wrote those words in response to Carl Sagan's response to such a powerful photo. We as a society, we as a human species, need to come together and recognize the realities of what we are doing to the earth. See, evolution, creation, whatever you want to call it, does not end with us. We all too often seem to think that this earth can't continue on without us. But the reality of the existence of us is that we cannot continue on without the existence of this earth. And that without us, the earth will find its way. I draw upon Chernobyl, a land which humanity has abandoned. But bacteria has found a way to survive. Nature will always transcend humanity. And until we are ready to accept that and realize that and focus on how we maintain this planet in a way that continues its existence, we will die. I've said it multiple times on this podcast. We have until 2030 to stop global temperatures from raising 0.5 centigrade. 0.5 degrees centigrade. We have 10 years to do it. Or else we will spark uncontrolled climate change that humanity will have the worst of times trying to survive and cope with. While famous people, many rich people, are developing ways and trying to find ways to inhabit other worlds, that will never exist for those of us that are working class. That will never exist for 90% of this world and all of third world countries. So we as developed nations need to find a way to come together, to sit down, and to admit that when we drop bombs, we are not only killing humanity, but we are scarring this beautiful planet. When we fly planes into wars and set ships off to sea in order to engage acts of war against others, we are scarring the very planet that sustains our existence. We need to stop thinking of every bomb as just another bomb, but start thinking about every bomb as not only something that kills people, but something that slowly tears at the seams that hold this planet together. We need to admit that the way we've been living our life is unsustainable. We started the destruction of this world hundreds of years ago, and now we are giving a very, very thin time frame to rectify it. We are seeing climate change in ways we have never seen before. Wildfires on the West Coast burning at rates that they have not burned ever before. We are in a hurricane season, which has seen the earliest named Greek storm, has seen the most storms develop in the Gulf of Mexico at one time. We are seeing these storms strengthen in intensity and frequency. We are seeing things change in a way they have never changed, damaging floods in places that they typically would not occur, more violent tornadoes in places that they typically wouldn't occur. We watched the entire Australian outback burn just prior to COVID-19. And speaking of COVID-19, we are witnessing new and deadly plagues arise at rates that they have never before in this planet's history. We need to sit down. We need to come together as humanity in order to ensure that humanity has the ability to survive. My generation, we'll live. We'll be fine. Potentially our children will be fine. But our children's children are the ones who will more than likely face the most damaging results of our negligence. So when do we stop dividing ourselves amongst arbitrary lines, amongst all these different things we use to distinguish ourselves from one another? And when do we recognize that on the inside we contain all of the same body parts? We contain all of the same essentials that makes us function every day. And when you strip away the color of our skin, we all bleed the same color and look the same. We all evolved from the same species, and we are the same species. When do we sit down as a globe and determine how we fix this nightmare? In order to save the pale blue dot that sustains our very life. Because within that pale blue dot is everything we've known, everything we will know, and everything that will be written in the cosmic history of this solar system. Stay beautiful, humans.